Got it. Okay, we are recording live now on Zoom and we're recording live on Facebook. So we are ready to go.
All right, well, it is July 10th at 4:04 p.m. and I hereby call a special school committee meeting to order. I'm going to start with our roll call. I'm just going to go around the boxes. This is a virtual meeting on Zoom and on Facebook as we've done in the past, but we are not in person. But this is permitted under Massachusetts laws now. So I will go ahead and do a roll call, and I'll just do it in the order of the boxes that I see of the committee members I have. So Mr. Carr.
Ted Carr, present.
Ms. Leskey.
Present.
Mr. Kearney.
Present.
Mr. McClellan. He's connecting to audio. I'm going to wait and let him make the roll call. Mr. McClellan, we are just now doing the roll call. I see you joined, and if you can just indicate that you're present.
Just has to unmute.
We're so very close to for unanimous quorum. Brad, can you hear us?
Hey guys, barely.
Okay,
There you
and you are present though.
I'm at the pediatrician, so I got to be a little bit quiet. So I'm trying to listen in. You probably won't hear from me too much.
That's fine. I just wanted to confirm for roll call that you were present, and so I'll take that as confirmed.
Indeed.
So great. So thank you very much, everyone, for getting together on a special unscheduled it was scheduled appropriately with open meeting law, but a surprise school committee meeting. We have some information and some material changes to what's going on with our e-school bus implementation. And so given the committee's interest in this project and our prior approvals and some of the changes, I wanted to make sure we were together to figure out next steps and make sure that where the district is going is consistent with the committee's wishes and desires. So with that, Dr. Sullivan, I'll turn it over to you if you can give, and Ms. Owen, if you guys can give an outline of what's going on and what we've learned in the past week or so.
I will. Thank you, Lance. Yeah, we've had a couple of obstacles, mainly regarding our parking situation and also the charger that is necessary. It's I believe it's a level 3 charger that's necessary for this particular bus to make it really workable for us so that it charges enough to make sure that we won't be stopping in the middle of a route or having some kind of issue. I'm going to let Sue sort of explain the layout of it and kind of where we stand. And really what we need is we need to make a decision regarding our bus parking because of the basically the sort of the rules that they've kind of laid out for us with the installation and then actually the removal of eventually this particular charger and some of the rules they have regarding leases. And I'll let Sue explain sort of where we are, and then we're going to need a vote on which way to go. So Sue.
Sure. Okay. So as you know, this has been going on for like 2 years now. We've agreed to purchase the bus. It's about the parking. Ultimately, the best place to put the bus is with the rest of the buses. Unfortunately, we don't have a permanent home for the buses. And the question came up of we're leasing our parking lot now. And now the e-bus company doesn't want us to put a charging station, a level 3 charging station on a piece of property that we do not have a yearly or 5-year lease. 5-year. So right now we're month to month, and that was by our choice. I have spoken to the owner of the property, very agreeable to sign a 5-year lease with us, lock in the price for the first 3 years. Year 4 and 5, he'll increase by $200, which is, percentage wise, that's very fair, I think. And is on board completely with us putting it, has a perfect spot. The installation crew said it's going to be one of the easiest installs because he's already got the pole there and the electricity there. So it's just a matter of putting down a pad and putting in the charging station. Enel said they will temporarily put in a charging station there, but a level 2 until we have a permanent home, unless we sign a 5-year agreement with the property owner. If we decide to move and, back out of our lease with, appropriate notice, they said it can cost up to $50,000 to move the charging station.
And that
So
would be
that's,
on us.
and that would be on us. So that's kind of where we are right now. We can't live with a level 2. We need the level 3 in order to meet our needs for our routes. And right now, there's no other place to park. I know they dug the holes, or I guess that's what they call them, drilled the holes over at Deer Hill. It will go before conservation or Concom, as Glenn says, in September, October. Depending on what they find, it could be anywhere from $200,000. If there's some type of drainage issue, it's going to cost up to $400,000 to $500,000 to put in that parking lot at Deer Hill, on top of the $50,000 to move the charger or put it there now. So that's kind of where we're at. We need to make a decision. If we don't make a decision now, which is why we're having the meeting, we're probably not going to have the e-bus for September, and we need it for our fleet.
Yeah, that's the key. There really isn't the time nor the location to put a charging station. Even if the solution of keeping a bus separate from the fleet, which no one's comfortable with from an operational standpoint, even if there's no place to put this charging station. So really where we are is we need to decide that we're going to do a 5-year lease with this property owner, or the electric bus does not seem to fit the picture right now. And that would mean that we would need an additional bus, because we were counting on that bus to keep our sort of pattern of making sure we have busing for everyone and have buses for our athletic transports. And that's the second piece. If we decide not to do the 5-year lease at this particular location that we're in now, then we want to engage in a discussion regarding finding money for a diesel bus, and then moving forward with that, because if we don't, we're going to be short a bus.
Correct. And that doesn't say that the 5-year lease doesn't have stipulations in it that we can, with notice, get out of our lease. I'm sure it will say, the language will say we have, if we give a certain amount of notice, we can, and then the cost of moving the charger is on us. But Enel is not happy about, they don't want to put the level 3 unless we sign something with the property owner.
For 5 years, that's the key.
Yes.
Because in anything less than 5 years, we're going to have to move that charger to wherever we are at a $50,000 price tag, approximately. So that's it. So I guess what we need is a discussion about, and I would think a vote, Lance, regarding I know there's a question for Ted, but I'll let you direct that, Lance. But just expressing our need, we needed some discussion, an opinion, and then a vote for us to either secure this parking lot for 5 years, or to not do that and to keep month to month, and that would abort our attempt to have an electric bus. Then we have to engage in a discussion, if you choose that route, about us finding money to get a diesel bus, because we're going to need that. So I'll turn it over to you, Lance, to address the members.
So, and that's a good summary. I won't redo it for members, but this is why I wanted to get the group together here today, because the situation we're in right now is, in order to proceed with the electric bus, we effectively have to determine to extend our relationship with Mr. Staskow for a 5-year period. The terms are not unreasonable, and in fact, Sue, if I remember correctly, we did include in there, if he terminates, he would be willing to pay the relocation costs of the charger. So we've covered that off. So,
And he did guarantee that he would not be evicting us. If we left, he said it would be voluntarily.
things always change, and he doesn't necessarily have the he could do things. So it's an important provision and protection to have. So this is a new thing that I wanted to make sure that the committee was aware of. The other element is if we don't proceed with the electric bus on the grounds of the parking, then we still have a need for an additional bus, and we have funding needs that come with that. So we kind of, neither one of these decision points is optimal. But given that the committee has approved moving forward with the electric bus, I wanted to have the committee discussion on how we proceed now with some changed circumstances. So that's my introduction. And I know, Mr. Carr, you've been waiting patiently. So I'll, before I open it up to the floor generally, I'll direct it to you, Mr. Carr. You have the floor.
Okay, so. Thank you.
Oh,
Um,
Ed, you're coming in very choppy.
Can you guys
You
hear
might
me
want to
now?
go video.
Oh, am I?
Oh, wait, now you're
Now
clear.
you're okay, yeah.
Am I better? Okay, sorry. So could somebody explain to the group? I understand that in terms of there's logistics about if potentially the electric bus was somewhere other than the rest of the fleet. For instance, there's daily checks on drivers and things like that. Can somebody just for the other members? I think I understand it because I also am very close with the chair of the Alternative Energy Committee. But could you just share with the others, what are the barriers to keeping the electric bus somewhere else? Earlier, I did send a couple of examples of where I thought you might consider taking a look at. I think a lot on our own is something that I still believe we should pursue aggressively. I understand about how, the vendor wants site control for their expensive machine. I get it, right? I understand that. It's not unreasonable, but I like the idea of finding another home. So I suggested maybe we keep it over at the Deer Hill. The charger could go in the approximate area where our engineered lot is now. Then we have to figure out the lot. There's costs associated with the lot. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on some of these things. I also understand before getting on the board that there was some presentations about the potential of an RFP to put out these carport things where the roof is an electric charging thing. And the area for the bus had its own standalone in 2020, I believe the presentation was, where there was a potential lot. What this means is you could put it out for bid. A solar vendor would build the lot for us. And then the net metering of the electricity would go into the school most adjacent to it. So Deer Hill would get an energy cost lowering. Again, we'd have to go out for bid on that again. I just think if our only solution is to go with Don Stasko, who I know very well, I think he's a very reasonable guy. He's a good business guy. I think he would not let us down. This is an operational cost I think we could live with, but I sort of am curious to hear the full explanation on what are the barriers to keeping the electric bus somewhere else with the goal of we're trying to get a permanent home for our buses.
So I know Ray, the supervisor of transportation, has expressed his concern. They do morning meetings every morning. They go over the schedule. It's not just regular routes, it's field trips, athletic trips. So, and he also does like I shouldn't call it a wellness check, but they check all the equipment, and then he actually, checks all the drivers for fitness for duty. So that's part of it. He'd be doing it in two different places. The flip to that is where they are now, that parking lot is cleaned early in the morning, and it's guaranteed to be, the bus is cleaned off and plowed. Where it's, if it's parked somewhere different, we don't always have the promise or the guarantee that DPW is going to get to it. And that has happened to us in the past, that they haven't got to plowing us, and we've delayed school or canceled school. Sorry. Because parking lots haven't been plowed. So now you're talking two different places to plow. And then that one particular driver is singled out in a separate place, no meeting area, no bathroom. And they also have to park the car wherever it is. So that's kind of, I mean, ideally, all in one place is better.
It's also coordinating from two different areas. It's not logistically the safest option for us either, if you think about it, just separating the buses in that way. I have a,
Could I play devil's advocate for 1 minute? Okay, go ahead. No, go ahead, Pat. Sorry. I'm not interrupting
no,
you.
you were breaking up. I don't want to interrupt you. If you had some thought,
no.
I just I wanted to express something, but it can wait after your
Please,
point.
no, please, I interrupted you. It's the
No,
Zoom
I'm
thing.
not sure you did.
Okay.
Well,
Okay.
again, this is the wonders of Zoom.
Okay.
I was just trying to say that my hesitation is really the readiness of anything. I don't know that we're gonna, I mean, I have hesitations because of what Sue said, but I saw the places that you referenced, Ted, at Deer Hill. I don't see us having any of that ready for this install by September. And I also don't feel comfortable just plopping a bus on that lot. It's very tight in and out. I think we need a proper proper bus lot. I think we have a lot of ground to cover with the community before we're able to go ahead and put anything in regards to a bus lot on our property. And I only say that because of the feelings that have been expressed by members of the community whenever we've talked about buses. And I know that's the purview of the committee. I just don't want to put the cart in front of the horse proverbially. And I think we kind of have, unfortunately. I expressed this hesitation at the very beginning of this process because we don't have our own lot. I think we have, in order to really have a workable electric school bus, we do have to have some stability in where we're putting the charger. I had thought, based on the information that was provided to me, that this was a very small cost to move if we had got a lot put together and it was going to happen within a timely, sort of an idea of, a short-term prospect. My understanding was to move the charger was, and I'm just going to say it was just a couple of $1,000s, which meant to me it was doable. But once we started throwing around $50,000, that became a real stressor for me from an operational standpoint. And that's what kind of got this rolling. So even though I think there are some ideas out there about where to put this sort of lone wolf bus, I would call it, I have great hesitation about even the readiness to do that before we start school. Even if we did think that was a good idea, which I personally don't.
And that totally fair. Not ours to, we come up with suggestions for your consideration. It's your thing to run. Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. Let me add just a couple of things. The same power infrastructure that exists today at the front of the Deer Hill School exists exactly at the Stasco property. Same. Okay. Most of the fee, the $50,000, is actually the fee that comes from the utility for moving it. So it is, in this case, very rare that this is apples to apples. So it's the moving of the machine. So it's highly likely the $50,000 is not a real number, because it is like you're moving a machine, you're not moving infrastructure. Okay, so again, I got a chance to look into that. I believe that is an accurate statement. I don't disagree with you that this is not ideal. I think a permanent home for the buses, and then I'm going to stop talking because I want other, but I think a permanent home is the best thing for all of us. I really hope we can work towards doing that. I have a little bit of experience in the town of Cohasset, and when we decide on, sometimes when people with good intention decide on a 5-year lease somewhere else, it becomes the permanent solution. And I don't think it's the permanent solution. This is not only in Cohasset that this happens. This is sort of indicative of some other communities. So I'm nervous about that, but I'm okay with the price and I'm okay with the situation. I think it's fine. I hear Sue's explanation on there are things, that have to happen. In my mind, can that be overcome? But the number one thing is, if Pat Sullivan is not comfortable with it, then neither am I. And I want to make sure you guys have whatever you need to do it. And I see can you hear me still or no?
I could, yeah.
Okay. Number one is you all have to be comfortable, doing it. Look, I hear everything like plowing. First of all, number one, plowing over at at Stasco's, that is not our responsibility. That is his and his control, and he does a great job with it. We can get the town to plow out our bus. Trust me, we will get that. The number one thing, if the one issue that is like hard for people to understand, the first plow on the road, we'll go dig out our bus. Like that, these are things that can actually be overcome in this town. Okay, so, and then now I'm gonna start talking because I'm actually in favor, if the best solution is to go put it over at Mr. Stasco's for 5 years, I'm fine. I think we should not let go of the electric bus as an opportunity. I think it's here and it's now, and we are locked and loaded. And I believe if we pull the trigger on that and say, go put the charger over there, we will get the bus out here for whenever you want to implement it. But so my thoughts, and thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. I guess, what we'll do is we'll run through the committee members. I know, Mr. McClellan, you're in an awkward situation, so I'll briefly turn to you, but I guess, Ms. Leskey, do you have any comments or questions at this point?
I just have some clarifying questions. Does the $50,000 moving take care of both the removal and the new install? And I understand from Ted's comments that may not be the actual price, but is sort of an estimated price right now, but that would include the entire move. Okay, I'm seeing some.
It would, and I think Ted's comments are accurate. I think that's the worst case scenario, but it is the scenario they're presenting us, which made me nervous.
Yeah.
It's a lot of money.
Yes. What happens at year 6? So just moving our vision a little bit further along, it seems like having 5 years in one place was ideal for this lease company. What happens at year 6 and you need to move? Because that could also provide a really nice long-term window for planning for a permanent bus lot, getting it built, getting it funded, possibly syncing it with any sort of renovations that are being done at the middle high school, but thinking a little beyond that 5-year point and whether or not that allays some of that moving charge at year 6.
Sue, I'll let you answer that one.
So the hope is in year 6, ideally, my recommendation would be to go with Stasco for the 5 years and take our time to get the parking lot ready and working over at Deer Hill. We've already had, just because we've had small discussions, we've already had neighbors concern, commenting, about their needs and wants to not have it there. So I think it gives us the time to kind of sell it and make it as pretty as it needs to be to make the neighbors happy. Mm-hmm. And in year 6 or sooner, if we want to do it sooner, we then look at Deer Hill as our permanent place. In addition to what Ted said, these carport roof things that are chargeables and solar. Initially, I know way back when with the Alternative Energy Committee, we talked about carports for parking the buses underneath that are also solar panels. So, it gives us the time to kind of research all that and get it into place if that's what we decide to do. Without forcing it and rushing it and upsetting neighbors. And, I just try to be cautious.
And to address your question a little like directly though, Jen, so the idea would be we'd own the electric bus at the end of this of it, and we would have a fleet of electric buses. That's sort of the idea, the long-term concept. And that we would have a place to put them. Now, I have to say, one of their stipulations is that we have a 5-year lease. They're not actually saying that they're completely comfortable with us having a month-to-month lease. So we got to remember that. They're basically saying, in order for us to install this level 3 charger, you need a 5-year lease. So that's kind of like, so wherever they put it, they're expecting it to be there for 5 years. And as I think Ted put well, they're trying to protect their expensive machine. And that's really what it's about. So I don't have a guarantee that if we go, anything less than 5 years, that they're even going to let us do this. And so at year 6, we'd be looking for something different for sure, I would imagine, unless this ends up being I mean, I will say, I think having a lot on Deer Hill from an operational perspective, and I'm completely respectful of the community, and this is a community that we have to make a decision with, of course, but from an operational perspective, it makes a lot of sense to have it on our property. When I say our property, on school property, and that area does make sense operationally. And I'd be very open to that discussion, but we're certainly not there for the fall. Ted's idea of putting, or his thoughts of putting something temporarily with a slab, I'm not even sure we're going to be there for the fall, quite frankly, and that makes me nervous. And the town really hasn't offered a solution. We've had talks about solutions, but that is would kind of make me feel comfortable that we're going to have someplace to put this charger for, again, 5 years. Because if we put it short of 5 years anywhere, we're incurring the cost to move, which I believe will probably be less than 50, but that's the number, that's our ceiling. And that's what we have to consider. So they may not allow us to do this if we don't have a 5-year lease. We don't have a place to put it. We have some thoughts on where to put it if we do it less than 5 years. And anything less than 5 years, if we move it, we're paying for it.
Right. Okay, all right. I think I'm sorting through that. And is the financial loss to the district, if there's no e-bus, is the replacement with a diesel bus? Or are there additional charges that will be incurred from the e-bus company from withdrawing from the contract at this point?
I don't know, Sue. I don't believe there's anything that's been officially, we have a contract ready. Nothing's been officially.
I don't think there's, unless all the pieces fit, I don't think they'll move forward.
I agree. So nothing's been executed yet in terms of that finality of the deal. So there's nothing from there. There is a cost for a diesel bus that we're definitely going to have if we want our, we've given you some assurances that we're not going to have issues. And if we want that assurance to remain, that was figured with this bus, the electric bus, which would have to be replaced if we want those assurances. There's a few ways we can go about doing that, but that's a thought for us after we make a decision on the e-bus.
I mean, I think Ted put it perfectly. I really see the e-bus as a wonderful opportunity. So I think if there is a way to make that happen that feels right for the district right now and to keep the momentum going, I think it's also just a nice cultural comment around the commitment of the district to be more environmentally friendly, particularly in the area in which we live. So that would just be my final point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we may have lost Mr. Kearney. Or at least his box seems to have disappeared. Ted, I see you have your hand. Before I go to you, I just want to see if Mr. McClellan has the ability to make any or desire to make any comments, and if you'd like to at this time.
Paul's back.
And I'll turn it over to Paul next. So, Mr. McClellan, I'll take that as you're still in a public forum, unable to speak. Mr. Kearney, I noticed you dropped off, but you are back. Do you have any questions or comments at this point? You are on mute if you're talking. You're on mute if you're not talking. But she didn't know you were on mute and you were talking, telling you you're on mute. So we'll put a pin in Mr. Kearney. We'll head back over to Mr. Carr.
Thanks. Just one other thought for Sue, maybe. and I'm very glad to make a motion to recommend a lease there. But do you think that the vendor might consider some, as part of our 5-year contract, that he comes up with some number that he could live with, that we could live with, that might be less, should we vacate in less than 5 years? Like, so instance, is there some amount of money that we can buy ourselves out of the end of the 5-year lease if all of a sudden we get our act together and we get a lot in the future? It's just a, an exit strategy on a lease if we exceed our expectations and we can find a permanent home. Something to think about. Again, it's up to you guys. It just, all of a sudden, we needed to exit. At the beginning, we knew there was an exit number. We can execute on the exit number. The exit number is this, so that's not a surprise to anybody. It's a number less than what we would be paying. It's not ideal, but it gives us a little more flexibility. But I happen to know this owner. I think he's very invested in this community. He'd be probably interested in trying to figure out a great solution that works for everybody.
I think that's really
Mr. Carr, if you don't
thoughtful.
mind, I'll digest that slightly differently. Were we to go with the 5-year lease with Mr. Stasko, one of the elements we'd want to make sure we negotiate is a termination right. And maybe we don't know what the terms of that would be, what they'd be willing to accept. Ideally, it'd be a no penalty termination right. But if there has to be something, we can negotiate that. I think is that where you're going, Mr. Carr, making sure we have the ability to be flexible moving forward.
Exactly correct. Yeah.
And that would absolutely be something we talked about, because Mr. Stasko actually said, he asked me how long do we want the lease? He put it back on us. Do you want it month to month, which is where we are now? Do you want a year? Do you want 2 years? Do you want 5 years? So I think he's very amenable to putting something in there that, if we come up with a lot sooner than that, I believe with notice, appropriate notice, he would let us out of the lease, but then we're still gonna have to pay the $50,000 to move the charger.
I do want to see, I'll give Mr. McClellan another shot to see if he has any comments before I offer my own. So Mr. McClellan, any thoughts from you if you're able to join? And Mr. McClellan, I see you did come off mute, but we're not hearing any voice.
Yes, pardon me, outside. I'm just sorry. My perspective is, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
It sounded like you cut off right after my perspective is, so we were all very disappointed, but you're back.
Cliffhanger. So my perspective is that generally speaking, with anything in town, I feel like where there's a will, there's a way. And I I feel like this is one of the exceptions to my general perspective, in that because I'm fairly committed to it, just because I know how much work Ms. Bedell has put into this, and it's been a long road, and I just hate to see us sort of swipe defeat from the jaws of victory here, but it just doesn't seem to be an economically or logistically feasible thing for us to do right now. In other words, I feel like the juice wouldn't be worth the squeeze. I feel like in order to find, I think we'd have to fashion some really creative and probably fairly financially burdensome solutions in order to make this happen. And it's not something that we absolutely need right now. I do think that there are some costs associated with that additional bus, and I caught a lot of what was said. I missed the last 5 to 7 minutes, so I don't know if someone else suggested this, but I had mentioned earlier that we might be able to look, Susan, I don't know if First Student would be able to dedicate, I know you mentioned that we would be able, that they were ready and waiting if we needed any assistance, so maybe that's a solution for that other bus to replace it. But I hate the idea of leasing that property anyway. I hate the idea of leasing it on a monthly basis. I hate that we have to do that. I agree with Mr. Carr in that it should be a priority to find a permanent parking solution for our buses. And I think that we need to do that, and we need to fight that battle and win it before we move forward with the electric bus program, even the pilot program, just because of these recent issues. I don't doubt that Mr. Carr is correct in that $50,000 figure is likely it's likely exaggerated or overinflated. But we just don't know what it's going to be, and I just feel like there's too many variables here with cost, and it's not something we absolutely cannot do without right now. And I hate to take this perspective because I love, as a lot of you know, I love progress, I love change, and I really love doing it when people put a lot of effort into making it happen. But I don't know that I don't know it's the most prudent course of action for us right now. So my opinion is to try and pause, put sort of suspend this, and whether we have to just start the process all over again once we get the permanent parking solution figured out. And in the meantime, just get ready for this school year by engaging first student for that extra bus, and move forward with the Stasco situation on a shorter term situation. And in the meantime, I'm ready to get quite aggressive about finding the permanent parking solution. But that's my perspective. And I did hear most of what everyone said, but I'm sorry that I'm sort of, it's just a really tough time. Of course, I had a pediatrician appointment with my daughter at 4 o'clock. So it's a little bit difficult. So I'm sorry. Thank you guys for dealing with me. And I don't have a good camera on my phone, so that's why the camera's off. Thanks.
Mr. McCollum, thank you. We appreciate your perspective as always. I'll offer my thoughts, and then I do want to poll the committee on a point. So I actually look at this less about electric bus versus diesel bus. I think electric bus is a supporting character in the question before the committee. I think the question before the committee is, we are now, for reasons that relate to the electric bus, forced to accelerate our decision making, at least for the medium term, about bus parking. And bus parking has been a problem since I joined the committee 2 years ago, and we're looking for solutions for that. The solutions are not going to be done in the fall. They're probably not going to be done next year. But what we're being asked to give up is the optionality, effectively, to cost-free move to a Deer Hill solution or some other solution within the next 5 years. We need to solve the parking solution for the buses for the next 5 years. Now, fortunately, we are presented with a potential solution that has been economically okay with the district for the past 2 years, and that is parking at Mr. Stasco's lot. He's proven to be a effective landlord in this regard. He's made some certain improvements for our buses, and from an operational perspective, the feedback I've heard over the terms has been that it's been a positive development. So I guess the narrow read I'd like to get the committee's feedback on is, what are the committee's thoughts on extending the lease with Mr. Stasco at the expense of optionality of building our own lot within that 5-year period? And so that's really the way I look at it, is that's what our decision is. And everything else falls from there. If we don't want to extend the lease for 5 years for reasons, then we have one path. If we're okay with extending the lease, we've solved the bus parking issue for 5 years, but we're not able to move as quickly on a permanent home as we would like. So I'd like to get the committee's thoughts on that particular point. And I guess I'll just go in the same order. Mr. Carr, if you don't mind chiming in first.
Sure. I would be fine. So I see a couple of things. I would be fine. Look, we need to park our buses somewhere. Our current solution is there. We don't have another solution. So I see sort of two pathways. One we could, and I'd be very glad to make the motion to recommend that we enter into a 5-year lease for the administration. We get a 5-year lease, and then that relieves the pressure, and we can do thoughtful things like Sue and Pat have suggested, and that makes sure we get the permanent home of this very, very right for the bus. Second solution is, I think the vendor for the electric bus wants the bus to come here as much as we want the bus to come here. So we could take a vote to say, look, we're just not comfortable entering into a 5-year lease, push back and see what they come up with. And if the answer is goose egg, the bus goes away, no problem. If they, and I'm not a betting person, but where I sit and read the tea leaves, this vendor wants an electric bus in a town like Cohasset because they're going to get other towns like us to get more electric buses. They might be willing to deal with us if they know that the political will of their decision on a 5-year lease just is not going to fly. So I could go in either direction on that one. I want to make sure you have all the tools in the toolbox. ready for the fall, and I see like we need a permanent solution for buses, and frankly, we need to get it off our list for a little bit until we have a better idea, and this is a perfectly reasonable place in my mind to do it. I don't like it, like Craig has mentioned, it's not perfect for us, but it is where we live today. So those would be my thoughts on that.
Lesky, your thoughts on the extension of the Stasco solution for another 5 years?
I'm perfectly comfortable with it, given that at least in the discussion today, there were provisions for an early termination. And I think that is sort of a lovely insurance policy for us, were the permanent solution to come faster and more easily than we might anticipate. And we can still actually charge ahead with that project, as I think many would like to do, because it's the most responsible way forward, is having a permanent home for our buses. So yes, at this point, I'd be comfortable with that, given the provisions of an early termination were negotiated as well.
Mr. Kearney, you had dropped off for a minute. I saw you pop back up. Just to quickly refresh, the way I'm looking at this is a somewhat binary choice between it's a different question than E-Bus or not. The question is, do we extend the Stasco lease for 5 years or do we not? And I think that there are things that fall out of that that impact the electric bus. But I think the question for the committee is really, do we extend this lease with Mr. Stasco for 5 years? So I'm soliciting thoughts from the committee on just that, extending the Stasco lease for 5 years.
Okay, I'm not going to comment on it, and I'm also going to abstain from voting.
Is that because you have a conflict of interest that?
No, I wouldn't say it's a conflict, of just kind of where I stand, that's all.
So, Mr. Keenan, I am going to push you a little bit on that because you provide great perspective and insight to this committee, and your committee and your perspective is very valuable. And you know,
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I just don't really have much to say here. There's not a lot to say. Just it basically, it is what it is. I mean, so I really don't want to comment on it, to be honest.
all right. That is fine. Mr. Ricola, I know you are in an awkward situation. It sounds like you might be able to speak a little bit more, but I think your perspective is not as rosy on the Stasco lease, but I'll let you speak for yourself. I see you came off mute.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I am against it. I think that, I would rather force us and force that it's the town. The town is responsible for this. This is the public school system. We need to find a place for the buses. I do not want to sign a lease with someone locking the school district into a $250,000 expense for parking our buses on a dirt lot. I don't want to do that. I think I understand that we don't have an alternative in front of us. I'm against it. I don't like that. I think that I think that people know that we're under duress. I think it would be a decision that's a very, very expensive decision made under duress. I refuse to do it. There's other places in this town. We're going to have to figure out where to put the buses. There are school buses, and I am not going to be cornered into that. So, and I understand that we're not going to come up with a permanent solution overnight. That's going to take a while. That's going to be a very slow burn, I know, but there has to be an alternative. So I'm against it strongly.
Okay, and before I open it up to any sort of motions or votes, do we have any recommendations or thought from the administration?
So what I was gonna say, it's Stasco's not the one requesting the 5-year lease, it's NL. But what if we tell NL, okay, we're gonna do a 3-year lease with Stasco, and what we're paying Stasco to rent his property is $48,000. So if we decide to move the charging station, the money that we save from not paying him in the next year is almost the same amount of money as it is to move the charging station. It's 48,000 versus 50,000. So, we don't have to commit to 5 years. Why don't we open it up and, think more optimistic that, okay, in year 3, we now have a permanent parking lot set up at Deer Hill. And we do have to pay $50,000 to move the charging station, which is the money that we would save from not paying to rent from Stasco. I mean, it's the same amount of money.
Is
Right,
that
but
something
then
that would be, I didn't, I'm sorry if I misunderstood. Is that something that would be palatable to Enel and to Stasco? I mean, are people going to stay? I mean, I thought Enel was saying we have to have a 5-year lease
They
in
are,
order to do this.
they are saying that.
Or-
I think Sue is saying that based on, I think Ted's comment, I think there's some accuracy in that. I think that there is an interest in this happening in Cohasset from NL. And we haven't gone back to them and negotiated with them about this fact. We tried, we said, they laid it out for us. 5-year lease or $50,000 to move a piece of machinery. And actually it wasn't an or, it was an and. 5-year lease. And, you know, if we even agreed to anything, it would cost you $50,000 to move the machinery. So I don't know, and we can come back to them and say, you know,
Before we get bogged down in kind of the, you know, number game and the alternatives, I do think Mr. Carr already kind of foreclosed or solved this issue with his suggestion of a clear termination right. So if we have a 5-year lease with a termination right that allows us, let's just hypothetically say 1 month termination notice, then that's effectively, you know, a 3-year lease or a 4-year lease or a 2-year lease, whatever the term is until we have our termination right.
yeah, it's
So
still a
I think-
$50,000
We then
removal.
still have to pay the $50,000 to move the electric bus charger. So that's it. That is something we have to, if we move forward with the electric bus, we have to understand we're digesting an extra $50,000. But what I also understand is that if we do not move forward, we have to find another $25,000 or so for a new bus, or we engage in a for student lease for an additional bus. Either way, we're 1 bus short. So fair?
Correct.
That's
Okay,
correct.
but guys, so Enel wants a 5-year lease, but I'm sorry, but like, if that's fine, if that's great. What Mr. Carr suggests is great if they agree to that, but that's not a 5-year lease. A lease with, like you said, Mr. Dial, a lease with 5 years contemplated with a sort of at-will termination clause is not a 5-year lease. So if they're going to say that's okay, then great. I'd also just push back on the $50,000 thing. Tell them no. I mean, why are we playing chicken here? If they want the buses here, if they want the electric bus here, which I would like, I think it would be a nice thing. I think it'd be a boon to Cohasset. I'm supportive of it. That's why I voted for it. But I don't know, they came in and were willing to work with us, and now they're saying, oh no, we want you to have a 5-year lease. We want you to have, you know, you're going to cost $50,000. Why don't they work with us? Well, I mean,
Well-
if they want it to happen, why don't they pay for the term for the relocation cost, which I'm sure is probably not as significant as they're making out to be, like Mr. Carr stated. Sorry, I have to go mute again for a minute. Sorry, guys.
Well, they might, like, again, but we wanted to get the disposition of the committee on this. I have a meeting with them tomorrow. I can go back and Sue does too, and we can say, look, we're not comfortable moving forward with a 5-year lease. We think we can do a shorter term lease. We can do 3, but we don't want to have to pay the installation. We can do that. We can push we can do whatever. Because this is, if we do, and I'm going to use Craig's analogy, sort of playing chicken here. If they say, no, it's over, we're going to have to come back to you and ask you for another solution to get an additional bus. That's really why we're here. We can go through these negotiations without you, but at the end of the rainbow is if they say, no, can't do it, we still need a bus and we're going to have to come back to you. So if you give us the license to go ahead and do that, we will try. But if it falls short of that, we need we're running out of time to be able to get a bus ready for the fall, one way or another.
I think trying to bring this to a conclusion, I think there's 3 things that I'm hearing that I think will have consensus on the committee. One, we would do a 5-year lease as long as there's a termination right where we can terminate it. And Mr. McClellan's point notwithstanding, if it's acceptable in Al, then it's acceptable to us. And in fact, it doesn't necessarily change too much of our day-to-day. And in fact, there's advantages for doing that, is locking in prices for 3 to 5 years. And so let's explore that. I think that's good stewardship anyway, to see if we can get this locked in for a period of time. And if that meets NL's needs, all the better. So a 5-year lease with a termination right, and we'd have to understand what the termination right is, but it'd be a notice only, not a penalty. So that's one thing. On the charger relocation, I hear Mr. Carr's point, which is a very good one. It's not going to be that expensive. And I hear Mr. Carr's point, they really want this to happen. So let's push it back and say, hey, you guys, we understand it's not going to be expensive. You guys pay for it. Let's just see what they say. I don't think that hurts us, because if we can solve their 5-year lease problem and get them to pay for the relocation, they knew at the beginning we didn't have a lot for this. Okay, so they've continued to pursue down this road knowing we didn't have a place for it. This is not a new problem. So I think that they should be willing to take this. We're giving them what they need as far as certainty on the lease. They give us what we need as far as financial certainty on the relocation. And I think we have consensus. And I don't know if other members of the committee feel like that would be a good solution, but I think that seems to make sense and captures the sentiment of the committee as I've understood it. And does anyone object to that approach?
I totally agree with it, Lance. I just want to note that my major concern, my primary one, is being ready for the school year, which is coming soon. So that's my major concern. I completely agree with everything you just said.
Me as well.
So
I agree.
Mr. McClellan, you just got, like, I think I've never seen heads nod in unison as much as they just did after that. So I think that's everyone's primary goal, is to make sure our kids can get to school safely. So Dr. Sullivan, you have a call with him tomorrow. Ms. Owen, maybe you could reach out to Mr. Stasko and see about this approach. I don't know, given the tenor of this, that we need a resolution at this point. We might need a resolution ultimately and we could go ahead and affirmatively do it now if we wanted to get a resolution to approve the district's ability to enter into a 5-year lease, subject to the conditions discussed herein, if that'd be helpful for you.
Can you, Lance, I'm sorry, but can you just explain the conditions therein? I want to make sure I'm crystal clear on it,
Yep.
because we've talked about a lot of things. Can you just summarize it
so-
one more time?
So it would be a 5-year lease as described by Ms. Owen with the $4,000 for the first 3 years, $4,200 for year 4 and 5.
That's
we would
what-
have a right.
That's up to Stasco, right?
Well, that would be in the lease. That'd be in the agreement. And then we would have a right of termination that would be, with a reasonable notice period, but no penalty. So we could say maybe it's a month, maybe it's 2 months. We can negotiate the notice period that's reasonable, but no penalty. And then 3, if he terminates us, then he pays for any costs associated with the relocation of the charger.
Okay, but then that's with Stasco, but the issue
That's
I
with
have is
Stasco.
with Enel. So I want to make sure that what I'm licensed to do with Enel, because it
Now-
sounds like Mr. Stasco is going to be flexible around those factors. I think the key right now is Enel. What is the school committee's suggestion about how we negotiate with NL, and what are we willing to accept and what aren't we willing to accept?
So with Enel, I think what you're hearing is that, and committee members, please jump in after if I've gotten anything incorrect or I mischaracterize anything. What you're hearing is we would be willing to provide them with the 5-year lease that we just talked about for the specific piece of land, so we can show them that. But we do want to push back on them with respect to the relocation. And we think that they knew coming into this that we didn't have a place to park the buses, and we think it's unfair now for them to have us shoulder the burden on a variable that they knew existed at the beginning.
Okay, now, because I want to make sure I have a good clear, what if they may want to negotiate that and say half or, something like that. I guess what you're suggesting is that we do the best we can with that, but we're not willing to take, the whole cost.
If I were to put a number on it personally, and other committee members can chime in, I think, given that it's a negotiation, I don't want to do that in public forum.
Right.
But I guess what I would say to you, Dr. Sullivan, is that there are costs the district would have to incur if we go the non-electric bus route. And so if the costs of relocation are equivalent to the costs that we would incur going in the non-relocation route, I would personally be okay with that. Or if they're better.
Yeah, and I think your thought about the $50,000 not being okay is the way to go about this. I think that's untenable for us. And that will be a cost that will sink us in terms of our transportation budget. So this is all money not anticipated. I was able to stomach like a couple $1,000s, which was originally mentioned to me by Sue. And that is not on the table right now. So I would suggest, Sue, that we go in, because quite frankly, this is an unanticipated cost, that the $50,000 is not tenable, and we're not really accepting much of any cost in that regard in terms of relocating this charger. So, okay, that gives me a pathway if the committee is amenable to that.
Any other comments or concerns in the committee about that pathway?
None from me.
So
None for me.
No,
hearing none. So hearing none, what I'd like to do, just to clearly enable Dr. Sullivan to move down this path, is to request a motion from the committee to approve the district's ability to, not require the district to, but to approve the district's ability to enter into a 5-year lease for the school bus parking on terms discussed herein. Most importantly, the costs that we've discussed, $4,000 for the first 3 years, $4,200 for year 4 and 5, that we have a reasonable termination provision, and that if we are terminated by the landlord, they bear any costs associated with relocating expensive electrical equipment. Does that make sense to the committee? And if so, do I have a motion to that effect?
I'd be glad.
point of inquiry, Mr.
Point of
Chair.
inquiry? Yes, sir.
You said reasonable termination. I think we should clarify that to be like basically at will, as it was articulated, like within a month's notice, we can terminate the lease at any time. And also, regardless of which party terminates the lease, I'd like Enel to eat the cost. That would be my, I don't know if that's what the committee wants. That's just, I would like to see that.
That makes
So
sense.
The Enel, we cannot, in our agreement with Stasco, require Enel to eat the cost. So that's going to be a discussion that Dr. Sullivan and Ms. Owen will have to have with Enel, and we've
Correct.
directed them that's going to be part of their discussion. So as far as the motion is concerned, on the point of inquiry, I hear your point on the reasonable termination provision. I think what we were referring to there, at least as far as discussion, was no termination period, but we could give a reasonable notice period, and I'll put a cap on that at 3 months, if that makes sense.
Okay. But there's no language in this motion relative, because we can't contract terms that bind any party we're not in privity with. So you had mentioned an issue with the eating the cost of the relocation only if the landlord terminated it. I agree. We can't require any terms that bind Enel to anything either way.
No, that term would be that Stasco would pay the cost of termination if Stasco terminates us, and that would be included in our lease with Stasco.
I see. Okay.
But
I see.
Craig, I like
I
in my
see.
discussion point with NL to basically say, we're going for a 5-year lease, but if something comes up, and this is what my discussion will be with NL, something comes up and the landlord has to terminate early, or if we indeed find a better parking solution long term,
Right.
that we're not going to incur the cost of moving the charger.
Okay. All right.
That's what I'm gonna
That's fine.
say
I
to
was confused. Yeah. Okay. That's fine. So all right. My point of inquiry has been addressed. Thank you, Mr. Dial.
Just since we had that, does everyone understand the motion I'm requesting?
Can I mention something? I believe Shauna is an attendee to this meeting.
Okay,
Who is
Um,
Shauna?
Shauna is from Enel.
yep,
So I believe she's listening to she's on this meeting.
that's
Watching
that's
as an
good, that's
attendee.
good, I mean.
No,
Shauna's
yeah.
been great in
I just
helping.
wanted you to
The public
realize
meeting.
that she is hearing the discussions that we're having.
Then that's excellent. Our role as a public board, and I'm sure they are uniquely aware because they deal with towns, is we have to provide good governance. And this is, I think, a very good motion and good governance that protects us all and finds us a good solution. Yeah, we're going to reach an agreement with the vendor. If they can't do it, we totally understand, but I think this is good governance.
Absolutely.
Oh, So great. So with that, I'll just once again, just so it's fresh in people's mind. The motion is to authorize, but not require, the district to enter into a lease of up to 5 years with Stasco for the same price we're paying now, $4,000 per month, with 4,200 being year 4 and year 5, with 3 key features. One, a reasonable termination period, which is no penalty and a notice of no longer than 3 months for our termination. In the event of a Stasco termination, Mr. Stasco would pay for any costs that we might incur in relocating the charger. And I think those are the 3. We got the rate, we got the terminations provisions. And then that actually is the end of the motion, if I'm correct.
So moved.
So
Second.
motion made by Mr. McClellan, seconded by Mr. Carr. We'll just go all in favor.
Aye.
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 Aye. You know what? Give him resume. I'll do roll call. I'm sorry. So
Okay.
Mr. Carr,
Mr. Carr is aye.
Ms. Leskey,
Aye.
Mr. McClellan,
Craig McClellan, aye.
Mr. Kearney,
Abstain.
Mr. Dial, aye. The motion carries by a vote of 4 in favor, 1 abstention. Dr. Sullivan, you are now empowered to negotiate and enter into a lease on those terms. And also please be advised of the committee's recommendations and direction with respect to the negotiations with the vendor.
Thank you.
Thank
You have any
all.
questions or
Great.
concerns for the committee before we adjourn?
Thank you.
No, I
Any,
think that's
last-
a good pathway. I just want to make clear that Annelle's been really wonderful through the process. It's just a matter of, for whatever reason, not understanding the $50,000 relocation, which I've been upfront with them about.
And we are a district that, because of our particular situation with school bus parking, is probably more difficult to work with than others. So I appreciate their patience as we're trying to move forward with this. So any other questions, comments for the committee before we adjourn? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we
So
adjourn.
So moved by Mr. Carr. I'll take Mr. McClellan's as a second. And then again, since we're virtual, I'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Carr,
Aye.
Ms. Leskey,
Aye.
Mr. McClellan,
Craig McClellan, aye.
Mr. Kearney,
Aye.
Mr. Dial, aye. The special meeting of the school committee is hereby adjourned. Thank you all so much for your insights and your help as we move forward. And this has been great. Dr. Sullivan, please move forward.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Hold
you.
on, Lance, there's another matter on the agenda.
Calendar.
Oh,
What do we got?
So we have the Veterans Day.
I don't think we just adjourned the meeting. We lost we still have a quorum. I guess we could reconstitute a meeting.
Well, I mean,
I can do it. I mean, if it's for the veterans, I can do it. What do we got?
well,
should we come
We have
back
to
into
call to
session?
order another meeting.
we
guess we
lost
do
Craig,
it.
but we can get Craig back, we can continue.
Well, we have a quorum now. And it has been posted, so I'm not worried about that. We could just,
No, it was just a mistake. I would reconstitute the meeting.
Yeah.
I move we come back into session for purposes of continuing with our.
So moved.
and none of your motions mean anything right now. We're not in session.
Oh, all right. So what are you asking?
All right, so why don't we do this? I'll send a note to Craig, but we do have a quorum, and I think he'd be okay with this. So I'm going to recall the meeting of the Cohasset School Committee into session. And I'll do quickly with a roll call. Mr. Carr,
Aye.
present. Ms. Leskey,
Present.
Mr. Kearney,
Present.
and Mr. Dial, present. Mr. McClellan has dropped off, but I've asked him to see if he would call back in. So very quickly, I'll turn it over to our superintendent to raise the issue for the committee.
Okay, thank you. Go quick with this. So as I had mentioned in our discussions regarding Veterans Day, when we were setting the calendar, the way that federal holidays work as a general rule is that if and I've learned this because of when Juneteenth came into existence as a federal holiday, if a holiday, which occurs on a particular day, occurs on a Saturday, then it is observed on that Saturday. This is the general rule. If it occurs on a Sunday, then it is observed on the following Monday officially. Now, the stipulation with Veterans Day, however, I've learned is that if it occurs on a Saturday, it's observed on a Saturday, but also may be celebrated in some form on the Friday that precedes that Saturday. So there's no obligation, unlike if it occurred on a Sunday, when it would be an obligation for us to observe it on the Monday. There's no obligation for us to observe November 10th is the November 11th is Veterans Day. There's no obligation for us to observe it on the 10th. However, we do have the ability to observe it as a holiday on the 10th. Now, the reason I'm bringing this forward is that there are many school districts around the area that are taking that pathway. I believe Situate isn't, and we so far aren't. I couldn't find another district in the immediate area that wasn't celebrating it on the 10th. Boston Public Schools has it off on the 10th. Again, there's not, I didn't know this was even a thing because I'm following the rules, but apparently with Veterans Day, they've made that stipulation and many school districts are doing that. So as I became aware of that information, I felt it was important for me to let you know that because you do set the calendar, and I will have to share this decision, of course, with the CTA and anyone else, once the decision's made, if it is made. So that's it. So you might want to consider the 10th as a day off, which would push our last day of school, which is now set for a half day on the 11th of June. It would move it to, that's a Tuesday. It would move it to Wednesday, the 12th of June, which would be a half day. If you do decide to celebrate, recognize Veterans Day, with a day off for students and staff on the 10th of November.
So any questions, comments, thoughts from the committee?
I was wondering when the town of Cohasset is doing their celebration, given that the fifth graders often have done their essays and presented and so a day off does make sense for a very logical reason at that point.
I mean, it is strictly referenced as being, I don't know that answer, but I mean, the 11th is Veterans Day. And that's when it's officially observed. But again, there are celebrations that can certainly happen from a town on the 10th, including not having school because of that celebration or in tune with that celebration. So I don't know that. I don't
The
know.
question
Mr.
is,
Carr.
do we know what the town is doing in relation to holiday day for the other employees of the town?
I don't.
I don't know what the town is doing. I know that the federal government is recognizing it on the Friday before. So
Okay.
that's one of the things that prompted this. And I think Dr. Sullivan, I think you expressed this, but there are other districts locally that are also doing the Friday before.
Yeah, the federal government it says we can recognize it on the Friday before. There can be activities. It's still Saturday.
So can I chime in?
You absolutely can. Thank you for joining, Mr. McClellan. Let the record show that Mr. McClellan has joined at 5:13 or 5:12 probably.
I think this is one of those very solemn days in the United States calendar. And I think that it's very important that we share the sort of sacrosanct nature of that day with each generation. And for that reason, I think it's important. I think it's of the utmost importance that we do celebrate it with a day off from school. Although maybe a third grader will just appreciate not having to do some math that day, it will in some way, shape, or form, I think, take hold in that, you know, they are getting the day off for a particular reason. That reason is to honor our veterans, those who have served in the United States military. So I would like to see us do this. That's my perspective.
Thank you, Ms. McCollum. Any other thoughts from committee members? Mr. Kearney, we've not heard from you yet. So, no, Mr. Kearney, you may be on mute if you're speaking.
No, I'm fine with it. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. No, thank you.
Would you like a motion?
Yes, so I was just about to say, if there are no objections, what I would do is request a motion that the district amend the calendar as previously approved to include November 10th as a holiday for observing Veterans Day, and then adjusting the end of the year accordingly to match up with our obligation of minimum number of school days.
I'm glad to host that motion.
I'll second
motion.
Mr. Carr's motion.
Made by Mr. Carr, seconded by Ms. McCollum. We'll do once again, because virtual, do roll call. Mr. Carr.
Carr is aye.
Leskey? Nope, you're on mute.
Thanks. Leskey, aye.
Mr. Kearney,
Aye.
Mr. McCollum,
Craig McClellan, aye.
and Mr. Dial, aye. So we have a unanimous vote of the school committee to make the revisions to the calendar. Dr. Sullivan, please proceed with the revisions as directed.
Thank you very
And
much.
thank you for the reminder. Now, one last requested motion, second time today, request a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. Do I have a second?
Second,
Seconded.
Seconded by Ms. Leskey. Mr. Carr,
Aye.
Ms. Leskey,
aye.
Mr. Kearney,
Aye.
Mr. McCollum,
Craig McClellan, aye.
and Mr. Dial, aye. We are hereby adjourned for real this time. Well, not that we weren't adjourned for real that time, but for finally, we're not going to come back together today. So thank you everyone for your attendance and your patience as I work through an agenda so well and flawlessly.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great day.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Have a good
Thanks
one.
for your support.
Bye-bye.